even in the lands such as this, geographies like of ours, where we have such diverse, such multiple languages and like practices of gender. So it has like at least it says that that there is an ambition of technological innovation to better the human life and to change and then manipulate the human environment accordingly. But the first thing which it says that it has an aim to better the human life. So I think like and the major uh, the science and technology studies have given us this understanding of technology being social, not just in the making of them, in the innovation of any particular kind of technology, but also in terms of the way it gets built, like the way the product we have after a technological innovation. So I think from there, that therefore I would try to maybe understand the technologies of gender, particularly transgender, because the paper is about that, and then understand the technology of security, on which many philosophers, especially Foucault, has written a lot on sovereignty, security, how the technology of security then plays a huge role in the way how welfare mechanisms have been there the way they are, how they have been existing from the time immemorial, not immemorial, rather from the modern times. So, so yeah, I think it would be better if someone can just text that they can hear me. Okay, okay. Thank you, Alice. Yeah, so uh, maybe then we can start with like say, what does this technology of gender entails? Maybe we can begin by saying that the certain and very like specific to an applied science field, which is social. I'm trying to say again and again, but like very specific how we understand like clinic is there. There are medical professionals in the hospital. There are nurses. There's a technology which is governing a certain kind of an operation. There are tools which have also developed through certain kind of technology. So, to the technologies which we harbored in our biological system, if you want to say, which is, say, the technology as a reproductive system or a digestive system, which even biologists have argued that it is the technology that they are trying to understand, and therefore they're also then trying to make certain uh, mirror images of those particular kinds of technologies. And then there's an entire literature on that. So maybe to just begin with, to see that uh, how and at what particular time the medical transitioning, the surgeries which are the sex reassignment surgeries which are becoming the norm, basically, or getting uh, a nodal permission from biomedical sciences authorities and the commission which govern them. And it is very important to then know that it's it's an entire picture just does not entails as what is going to be the welfare of humankind, what is not going to be the welfare of humankind. And I must say it already that by saying all this, I'm not trying to criticize the individuals who are uh, medical sex reassignment surgeries or any kind of hormonal therapies and all. But then to also but the point here is to understand that at what point are we getting onto these particular kinds of definitions of existing as biological beings, as belonging to that Homo sapiens, and the categorization of male and how that particular categorization is what we will look into in today's webinar. So, first of all, maybe to uh, just chart out that what entails, a normal male human being in a biological concept and also in the language of state, what we have right now, how any kind of a modern state apparatus understands uh, normal uh, male human being and normal female human being, and I'm using the word normal deliberately, will come on that later. Is that a person who has a certain technological network in themselves? Say if it is a male, then there has to be like there are these three pillars in biomedical ethics which are centered to a signage of personhood to any human being, and the personhood also has necessarily have to be not pathological, if not normal, but also not pathological. So at least biologically. So what we have then in front of us is this picture where a male has to have an XY chromosome. The chromosomal pillar has to be show an XY representation, has to have that particular kind of representation. Then they have to have a certain kind of testosterone hormone, which everybody basically has. Empirically, biologists have proven it, but still that hormone accounts to it, or at least has been represented or is getting represented through this picture of being a male hormone, while every kind of bodies have it in more or less quantities. Let's say in a larger quantities, it has to produce testosterone, and then we have comes to the gonadal picture of it, that there has to have testes in the scrotum, which is outside the body, hanging beneath the phallus. So in this entire picture, basically, on my voice. Yeah. So in this entire technology of being a male, one has to have these particular kind of networks at place. Yeah. So what then brings us, and then there produces it produces like the other half of it, which is and I'm referring to it that all these things are very biblical. All these things have like their uh, certain roots in religion, which is also very interesting. How certain kinds of religious creatures have been ignored or whatever by the modern medicine, but like also to necessarily see that the modern state apparatus has had at least the Victorian morality at play. So therefore, only the two kinds of representations or two kinds of technologies were legible in the United States, or were given the legibility in the United States. So, and similarly, when it comes to like a female, brings this picture of how having XY and then having estrogen and then having a vagina and and the entire the reproductive system having ovaries, which can also which goes into the process of ovulation, another kind of technology that also really submerged to make, to grant, to let assign the personhood, which is of a woman or a female. So, and I'm telling you this, even though everything have been highly deconstructed by feminism, or at least certain feminist thinkers through time, especially when the studies on intersex studies and studies into reassignment surgery started, they already the idea of sex already got deconstructed, but still, time and again, one has to deal with the question of where the sex is coming from. Can it be deconstructed the way gender has been? Can it be fluid the way gender has been? And I feel uh, both of gender and sex, there are enough empirical evidences to prove the otherwise, to prove that it is a reconstructed product already the way certain modern ethicists have identified or have recognized or assigned the status of personhood to them. So I think, and whoever is not in the typical definition of male and female, like the biologically legible the state's legitimate personhood would not would either be characterized as the deviance, which people write. Uh, but it's not just about a deviance, because after a point, as we will see further, that it's not just about the security, it's not just about the surveillance mechanism. It's not just trying to regulate and control people, but it is also understanding that the kind of freedom, the kind of I don't know, like restricted freedom he gets with the existence of stage. The subject positions of these sexual subjects also keep on changing. So the state then tends to produce knowledge about them, not just knowledge about them, but the state also certain times intends to produce the entire category of that particular population. And this population, the cultivation of such population includes those particular mechanisms or technologies or security which we will highlight and how we will see with the Transgender Act, which we have right now in Parliament, which has been passed, that we have rules right now, and there will be more rules coming in the meantime. And what are we witnessing is that, and if you also look at the evolution of this trans bill when it was there in the public domain and what has been passed by the Parliament, the medical transition was an important, like a key fundamental principle for one to get a certificate of transgender, but which they have changed it now because we also have among us the judgment of Nalsa, which states the otherwise, which states that none of these technologies should be should be given superiority over the other, that took from the notion of state, because it's only the individual who can decide to what kind of technology they want to associate with, to live with, and and then therefore they would want to have a certain kind of maybe in practical terms, a document of who they belong to, a particular category, a particular group. So, and that is where I think uh, I have been thinking about like the subject of the sexual, the subject of the face, and I'm telling you that for many, it might not be the kind of like for many individuals, the subject of sexual, that particular sexual technology might not be the principle of categorization, but for state it has become. So even when after like say 3 years, 4 years of that bill hanging in the parliament, when we witness a law getting made, it does not have a medical reassignment surgery compulsory to get a transgender certificate, while it does have a medical transition sex assignment surgery. If you want to become the the biopolitical other, either if you want to be assigned as the status of male or female, then that surgery becomes. Otherwise, there has to be only one report by a medical doctor, mostly a mental health counselor from a government hospital, which we also have to see how that thing turns out. But I feel it's not just about how, in the welfare of it, now transgender people can get a certificate with just getting a medical report, or the people who want to get assigned will have to go through the surgery. The problem with this entire thing is that the way technologies of gender have existed has been very different from how it has been in the West. So in West, also we have certain kind of with the regulation and the colonialism, like entire institutional structure, an entire state mechanism, the way it is right now, and also how the modernity has approached in the West, it has been very actively eliminated the sexual subject, which which it couldn't in the places like say India. And I'm saying eliminated because it obviously could not eliminate the subject per se, like the existing beings, but it could easily eliminate the social relations. Therefore, the concept of technology of gender, which I'm using, has been so there's a book. by Teresa de Laurentiis on this particular subject, technology of gender. She's saying that it's not just the technologies are not just referring to the reference of representation of someone being, but they're also referring to the relations to which those particular kinds of gender get practiced, of gender get ascribed to either ourselves or to others. And to just take an example from Gayatri Reddy, Reddy's book on Gujarat in South India, uh, there is a notion of rape which has to be mentioned as a custom. It's necessary to enter into the wholesaler relationship to become part of the gharana. So I feel even that rape becomes what we can call it as one of the technology of gender because that's what Teresa also wants us to understand that technology of gender not just fall into an institutional sphere, which say India as a nation state is doing by making a particular medical report from a mental health counselor to the government hospitals mandatory to have transgender certificate or making sex reassignment surgery with people with biometric. So, but we then need to understand that, and it's also very interesting that how right now it's not the mood of security to operate or technology of security to operate how it was, say, during colonial times. So during colonial India, I think many of us are aware of the fact that there existed a law called Criminal Rights Act 1871, which also included a category called UNEX, which was used for this range of deviance or sexual deviance, I can say, because with, uh, the law mentions that the professional sodomy, the kidnappers, and the criminals, so therefore they have to be eliminated. But like now, see the way things are, like it's an elimination campaign, it's just for termination of an entire category of people who are roaming around in the streets of Delhi, which is not pleasing to the Victorian morality, and therefore they are Victorian differences, which in which for them there is no space to exist. But with time, and therefore this particular kind of security mechanism or technology of security, where they have to come and register themselves so that they can be thrown out of the place, killed, tortured, and whatnot. So, and in that particular kind of and but what now nation state is doing, it's just trying to create a population which it knows that can't be eliminated. So which it knows that they couldn't silence it and it can't be eliminated and it is resisting. And so there's this, when Foucault mentions about the three pillars of modern Puritanism, all the pillars are basically under attack to existence of a trans woman on the street of Delhi in front of a red light, wedding. So that particular existence is an epitome of all these three that can't be silenced, it can't be eliminated, and it is resisting the normation of the gender identity that we have right now, is the biological normal selves. Now, to understand then this that why when these particular kinds of if they are not eliminated if, and they obviously did resisted and then they survived. So India then has to create a population like it does in the times of pandemic. It's where the humor becomes literal by political project which is not which is interesting that it's not gendered in those senses because the virus is not going to look at the gender before infecting you. So it becomes then the population of the host versus the person who are infected versus people who do not have a virus infection yet. And therefore, then different ways of security mechanism. So basically, even because at least till now we've had vaccines coming in, at least we've had inoculation campaigns. So the kind of technology of security was also very different in terms of which one to quarantine, which one to secure and where, and therefore, and I always feel that security, the moment someone comes up with the idea of security within the nation state is never trying to protect the political subject because it doesn't consider the citizen as political subject. Uh, but it's always insecure about the resistance of them to become political subjects. So that insecurity on which the nation state plays, this entire role of becoming of deploying these technologies of security to make through laws, obviously, because that's how it works. In a nation state, we don't have sermons now, we don't have these, Christian colloquies now, the folks are meeting and deciding, but we have laws right now. So, and to do particular kind of law, and they're trying to maybe display here that how the technology of security has been used then in the Transgender Act, which is very different, as I said, from the Criminal Rights Act, because the Criminal Rights Act, they wanted an elimination process. They wanted the DGs out of the city. This is also a kind of project which has been run in the West for a lot of other kinds of subjects, uh, including the sexual subjects. But here, what we witness right now, that within that entire spectrum of LGBTQIA plus, we have now like all these quadrants. Basically, we have the quadrants of what ranges from what, from a very spiritual towards a very biological, and therefore biological. Still, I think after so much of constructions of it and criticism and annihilations of it, it still holds a status, a privileged status, or a legitimate status holds that status. And I think that also is very interesting to look at, and therefore special kind of range exists. So we then see on one half, one we can say the one which is very social, when I became spiritual, and on the other half, then we can say the one which is very, uh, you know, uh, very biological. And the way, but and state is on the side of biology, it is not on the side of social. And for good reasons, because that's how the categorization, the classification in a modern state apparatus will work. So, so then challenge this entire thing, it comes up with this particular notion that is a graph. On the one side, we have social, we have biological, and then begins to start putting on these various kinds of sexual subjects onto this graph and tries to produce a straight line, which is the probability which state allows to exist in the eyes of law. And in the existence of this particular kind of probability, this particular kind of if you want to call it, not, I'm not very well equipped with the terminology for mathematics, but maybe I can go and look onto it. But at least in this entire range of so many different kinds of subjects, we then witness that there is on one hand, we have like a gender non-binary, which is a totally social subject as per in the eyes of speech, also in the eyes of biologists and biologists. This is allowed. There, okay, you can. But on the other hand, then we witness on the extreme of a biological gaze is the intersex sexual subject, which has to be highly pathologized in order to even grant, the allowance of existence for a population which is transgender people, which falls under this probability which they are trying to create. At least we can witness this in the particular land in the transgender act. I mean, yeah, while the definition of transgender act, if you look, has a very broad, has like enormous amount of sexual substance in it, but the way at least the act has been named that it is transgender act, and the violations of it particularly has also been coming towards the community which is transgender. So then we will have to then understand the population which is getting cultivated through the probability of, of having these particular kinds of social. So, When, when we have a population at stake, when we have a transgender population, that population has to fit its criteria of legibility. And obviously, legible, it has to be legible for the stage to. And in the reading of that stage, language plays an important part. Therefore, even though we have so many technologies of gender, of media, cinema, everyday life, language, and whatnot, institutional knowledge, where we call it a Lamarckian milieu, mental system in which the external also has a role to play, directly affecting the internal, which biologists never liked. So in that particular kind of thing, it has to be made legible, it has to be made legible. The language has to be understood in the eyes of state, and therefore it comes on to a kind of setup where it is asking for these particular kinds of documents to claim the transgender certificate. Now, is it erasing? Is it silencing? Is it uh, the explosions and all these the social uh, phenomena in sociology, especially all of these after a point do not play a big role or do not hold any bigger importance because the way things have been is that you will always be allowed to be whatever you are provided you become legible to the population of transgenders under the law. So if you are uh, meeting up the demands of the documents which are required under the rules they have been published, then you can get a transgender certificate through the medical report. But then you can choose to go into all those sexual substitutes. But the point is, uh, because it's one particular kind of technology of data, so and have been given the superiority just because it holds like just because biology holds that particular authority in the eyes of state. What does even need it mean to go to the other quadrant after exploiting this particular kind of technology? So basically, what we are witnessing here is that this technology of gender, which is having a medical report from a medical counselor or a surgery to become the we have uh, this, this, this entire we can witness an overlap with the technology. So this particular technology gender has been made a technology to cultivate the population which we have or which are yet to be formed now. So and in that sense then I think it's necessary uh, and at least I could then defend my position of using the word technology into defining defining of the sexual subjects and so on. So I and I think I will only speak for like few more minutes and then we switch on to the questions because this is like basically the overall picture of what I have been thinking. But I would also want to just maybe read a few things before coming on to the questions part. So yeah, and these are not the theories which I'm reading, so don't worry. I will only be reading the yeah the interviews, the paragraphs from my movie. Yeah, so and also with like this entire thing, they all say one particular kind of technology getting legitimization as well, which is feel like a productive system, which is like a reproductive issues thereon, and as becoming stabilized as a citizenry of India. Uh, Therefore, we will witness that it's not just that uh, the reproduction as a system which is getting stabilized or but all the other systems, all the other knowledge productions that are happening from an eye of the state have have taken reproduction as a presumed truth that that it has to exist, and that's the only paradigm in which we can define the gender and the sexual subject. So I think that is what is also the biggest harm which gets, and I think with the present day nation state, because I also feel that certain kinds of queer methodology, at least what I adhere to, can never be working with the state as a system of imperatives where state will more obviously will state will be power. State will have a particular kind of uh, politics of understanding me as not or as an inferior subject, or if it at all takes me as a political subject. And there will be the institutions of police, the institutions of army, the institutions of marriage, and telling you like the institutions of capital, the property. I think till then, the methodology where would never be able to basically bargain with the state because after a point the bargaining has to stop. Because every time the state will go on to work or state is coming on to the picture of bargaining, like it's coming on to it also sometimes doesn't come to bargaining because it's coming vis-a-vis Kashmir or vis-a-vis the places where it uses the laws like AFSPA, vis-a-vis the political subject, it uses the laws like UAPA, there is no bargain to the state. So I think, and because historically words have always been considered evils, and I must say that just like even in the biology, they are still considered as evil, no matter what have been coming along about various medical associations taking whatever position, but we still have lot of exposed sex reassignment surgeries or investigations which are going on. We recently lost a life to the sex change clinics and whatnot in Kerala. So all these things like the amalgamation of everything then also makes us think as a queer person and also as a queer academic, think about a methodology, a film methodology. So, to how this bargaining would ever going to work? And the answer is one we know from later, because I also say that there can never be something which is queer, that queering exists in this present continuous form of doing politics, thinking, writing, gossiping, and everything, and having sex and whatnot, and not having sex. So all these things are always happening in the process of becoming, an ongoing continuous form where can never witness the past form because also because it can't be silent, so it will always exist and will never be eliminated. So it just can't witness the silencing, and because there can never be a silencing, therefore it tends to emerge as a political subject. And when it will emerge as a political subject, then one has to see to what degree state is ready to bargain. And this particular transgender act, which is in violation with the document of NALCA, which is a judgment by the Supreme Court of India, shows it that the legislature will always be skeptical of giving this much fluidity to the political subject and which it can't after a point. So it has to rely on all these dogmatic principles of biology, which even biologists are saying they are not sure, and social science have been saying it's very wrong, but nobody is social science. But now even the conferences, the congresses, the associations of medical science have come up and stated their positions in homosexuality vis-a-vis intersex, post reassignment surgeries and medical surgeries with trans personhood. So I think with all this understanding, then we again come back to the idea of state can ever any state be queer enough for a queer person to really do queer politics. So these are the questions I think I also don't know, so I am telling you, if you know the answer, you can figure out. But I personally believe that it also shouldn't be there because the enormous amount of sexuality which was still and then later uh, which was revealed and there was a techniques which were deployed to eliminate the existence of these sexualities. It's it's also not going to be worth it to have a proper balance or have a beautiful welfare policy state because then something has already we have lost already because we are going to the stage demanding that cultivate the population readers make a language to people readers. Even if we are providing that language, and I'm sure everywhere here is and they fail to give like a comprehensive way around because they still can't. It's not it's so diverse as a subject position. Because, so therefore it's necessary to then also keep on thinking about wherein in terms of our thoughts, in terms of our writing, and in terms of are we agreeing to becoming the population of state, because it's also coming back to the discourse of being the good citizen of India, good citizen of any country, and the good or the citizen even, not even good or bad, just the citizen, vis-a-vis what? The refugee, vis-a-vis what? The non-citizens, the illegal citizens, and migrants and whatnot. And are we then as well people whose struggles match so much with the struggles of people who are illegitimate subjects of population state, which are governed, penalized, which are prohibited to exist as a human being with a mobile subject, are we then shouldn't we then reconsider our position and the welfare we are demanding? So this is to say that it shouldn't be like that welfare should not exist. It should exist because the existence of the state, the rights or the freedom or the liberty got snatched away and it has to now grant the liberty or the whatever the supposed rights and the policies it has to make and I'm sure many people are ready to also deal with that particular kind of I deal with those particular kinds of mechanisms to deal with making the population legible enough at least. And I'm sure like this, like I might also contribute to that, but I feel uh, with this particular kind of stage where the true politics is not basically right now possible because the moment you're establishing yourself as a political party, you're establishing yourself as an against the authoritarian regime, which is not ready to listen to anybody. So when it is not ready to listen to anyone's and even to the population, even to the individual one that created into a population, not listening to, then it's very hard to basically bargain. Then we might at least in our heads, like in a very subconscious or subconscious mind, I would want it to not to be very much on the paper, but maybe people also have to work out and watch out for the uh, but to maybe then understand that what kind of bargain is possible with the nation state interest like this. So when we say that the technology, the technology exists, the technology, the gender exists, it's also to say that they exist doesn't mean that they are made before the political subject or the sexual subject was there. So all these technologies are also the topic. All these technologies, because they're also signifier of say, the social relations of the individual, because it's not just the referent of an ascribed status. Social relations will always be there. So and all these newer social relations one can make, then one has to then basically we have to come up with these particular kinds of understanding reconstruct the idea of just being, not just like a woman, man, but of being. And in that maybe we can then try to reconstruct the idea of gender identity, not just non-binary, not just intersex literature, but the trans literature, and so much like trans literature is so rich, it provides us this aspect of technology, of memory, technology, of grief in existing technology, of meaning, technology, of love, and all these technologies are really one of the part in defining the set of the self-professional subject. So maybe then we can, uh, I can stop here and we can have questions, Meghna.
Those who want to raise questions either from Zoom or from here, please send it on the chat box. We are opening the floor for questions. Swapna Sarita wants the PPT presentation. They want you to share the PPT presentation.
Share me what?
The PPT presentation.
Oh, I'm not using a PPT, it's just the paper which I have written and I can't share it right now. It hasn't been published yet. So maybe later I can share it, but they can ask any questions if they have from the talk.
Any questions? Kaushal, I have one question. Acha, wait, Abha have asked a question. Could
Hmm.
you explain a little bit more about political subjects and security of modern state apparatus?
Ah, should I? Do you also want to ask questions, Meghna, now or should I ask people?
See, we have observed that the PG Act of 2019
Hmm.
is a very problematic act, and it is not the first time that they have made an attempt to have like acts like that. Before that, they try to introduce the TG Bill 2016 2018.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
is there any my question is there any pattern that you notice with the government's approach when it comes to managing trans rights? Because the current committee that has been formed is having erasure of trans men, intersex people, and gender non-binary, gender fluid, and gender non-conforming individuals.
Okay. So, Abha has asked about the political context and how this in a modern state apparatus security operates. And I think the political subject is anybody basically who is who is dissenting to the citizenry and not just themselves being the citizen of a state is what they are dissenting, but also who can speak to the state the way they want to. So in a present context, like the people who are charged under say UAPA, all the political prisoners who should be released, are all comes as a political subject. But this is also an extreme of the state's legibility, how state understands as a political subject. But also to come on to like say a university level, uh, you know, university academic levels, we can then think of any person who's talking about politics or using activism as a political subject or who is writing basically, and even if they are writing literature. So I would consider say, Amitabh Bachchan as a political subject. So, and especially when he's writing about the politics. So, it invokes understanding, right? Anybody who's, and I think the more of them being a political subject is to also more to that is to that who you consider as a political subject. Because the moment you consider someone as a political subject, you establish a certain ambiguous equalities among the two, where the other person will be listened to you, or his or their thought would be considered as 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 thoughts which could be criticized, which could be taken as something like as a word of philosopher open to criticism, not as a word of divinity, restricted to any sense of criticism, not to let the making of the sacred happen. So I would maybe stop there and then just like and and that's why I've been saying it that at least in the Marxist thought there is this tendency to question the thought of even Marx. Because if you read the literature, this came of later, Sylvia Frederick, even the contemporaries of Luxemburg, you can witness the criticism which is coming of Marx not having an understanding of women being the workers, right? So, and that is something which should just remain because that's the way that he's doing politics, even if people don't agree with the Marxist thoughts. But there are certain lines or certain methods of approaching a writing which should be uh, at least considered as, or at least I read them as they have been written vis-a-vis the other person in order that they understand the other person and not as a mark as a fraud or something, as like writing will take with or something. So, so that is one thing. And I think that's the criticism of Marx which has come up from anarchists which totally do not agree with the understanding of capital which Marxists have. They have also understood Marx as a political subject. So maybe the progressiveness of space one should not just be criticized because the person, let's say, in Indian context belongs to an upper caste. We can even, if we think about of that person as a political subject, then their politics, their writing, things would would also be taken into consideration more so than just being there as scribes favorites. And I feel that he also works with the activists who who are say queer activists, who are less queer activists. It's just really tend like because the subject position then might change vis-a-vis the kind of apparatus, the kind of thing that you're getting in. But the political subject would always speak the politics of all these networks, of all these technologies. Uh, and then I'm also asking about security of modern state, security apparatus particularly. Let's say begin with the present system, and I can talk more about the present system. Let's begin with how like in any modern setup, and that is what to say, uh, security exists. It has existed as what is prohibited and what is not prohibited. So what is allowed, what is permitted. So now heterosexual people have always been permitted but homosexual. So let's take an example of, of Germany post-Holocaust situation where Germany lost the war or the prisoners who Jewish were released out of the prison. But one section, or I think even more sections, but at least one section which I'm aware of, were not allowed to leave the prison. And also to talk about the government has not entered into the other technology of security, which is slightly recent population. It is an old process which I'm explaining to you, prison system and the way it has, linked to the gender. So the people who were part of whatever LGBTQ plus who had a pink triangle, who were called pink triangles with their number specifically, who were arrested and to the concentration camps and the Hitler's regime. So all those people were not allowed to go out of the prison after losing the war and the reform coming. Rather, because the law of sodomy was at place. because even in the liberated journey, the lots of window, similar is the kind of things we can think about, not in terms of the incarceration, maybe, but in terms of the colonialists going and leaving the 6 and 7 there, which which we also then this particular modern state apparatus, independent state, chose not to even talk about, like very hush hush when it comes to sex and sexual. So I think in those terms, then this particular uh, technology of prohibited versus permitted have now entered into the population which is allowed to be, the population which is cultivated, the population which is legible, and the state legibility then is to basically then make something which is make people a number which can be documented, which can be thought of as a data. But there are certain sexual perpetrators you see who are just not be, who will not be or never be allowed to do those subjects, those political subjects. So they will be either highly pathologized within biology or will be highly pathologized within the uh, now, with regard to your question, I think the pattern, one of the beautiful which has happened in the recent transgender rights, which got passed, which became the act, then the other versions of it, as I also mentioned, the evolution of this entire transgender.